Hey college football fans, it's episode 34 of Walk It Off with Chappy, and again, this is a Big Ten themed short, and I'm going to try and keep it as short as possible, but you know, when you love the sport like I do, you tend to get a little long-winded, and I hope you don't mind. So before I start this, the topic is Michigan or Penn State. I've heard on some podcasts, some people are calling for Penn State to be that dark horse team that could win their conference when most people are not expecting them to. But I don't hear a lot of people saying the same thing about Michigan. Now, this is a Michigan team that made the CFP last year. They're the reigning Big Ten champs, and they return a lot from that squad. But still, people are calling for Penn State to possibly do that. So I'm going to lay out these two teams. I'm going to tell you what I think, and I want to know what you think. And I'm also going to throw in a scenario where, what if Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, and I put those in alphabetical order so no one thinks I'm playing favorites, what if they all end up together? Now, full disclosure, those who know me know that I am not a Michigan slappy. I live in the Wolverine state, but I do not root for Michigan, although my girl probably wishes that I would. And I used to be a big Penn State slappy, but that kind of diminished when things went down there. But nonetheless, I love the sport, I love the Big Ten, and I love seeing those two teams do well because I think it's good for the sport. So anyway, let's look at Michigan. They, on offense, they look to be very good. They return not one but two quarterbacks, Cade McNamara, who was their starter for the majority of last season, and J.J. McCarthy, a highly touted recruit that people wanted to see on the field last year, and they want to see him on the field this year. Offensive line, they bring back three starters from last year's outstanding group, and they also add all ACC center Olusegun Oluwatimi, who comes over from Virginia. In the backfield, they've got Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, as good a 1-2 punch in the conference as you're going to get. Very athletic as well. They have the ability to take it to the house every time they touch the ball. And then at wide receiver, Ohio State clearly has the best wide receiver room, but Michigan goes pretty deep with talent as well. You start with Ronnie Bell coming back from injury. He was primed to do big things last year and got hurt in the opener against Western Michigan. Cornelius Johnson might be their best overall receiver. Roman Wilson, those are the three that will probably get the majority of opportunities. But then behind them, Andrell Anthony, who could work his way into a starting role. AJ Henning, and that's not even to talk about the three talented freshmen they've got coming in, Morris and Clemens and Walker. AJ Henning's another guy, and also they've got a pretty good tight end room as well. I really like Colton Lovelace, a freshman tight end that looked pretty good in the spring game, so keep an eye out for him. But then you look at the defensive side. Linebackers Junior Colson and Michael Barrett are tackling machines. The secondary is where I have a little bit of concern, mainly just at the safety spots. They've got some guys who've been in the program for a little bit, but I feel a lot better out on the outside, manning up in the corners with DJ Turner, Jamon Green, incoming freshman Will Johnson, who I think is going to be a star very soon in the Big Ten, and Mike Sanderstill comes over to play the nickel position, not only because he's talented athletically, but because they're so deep at that wide receiver room. And then specialties, Jake Moody and Brad Robbins are one of the best pairs in the conference this year. So let's go over to Penn State. Let's visit Happy Valley. What do they have on offense? Well, Sean Clifford, everybody knows, it's been well talked about ad nauseum that he's been there for a long time, and that translates to experience. That translates to somebody who is a gamer, and he came back this year because he sees some unfinished business. He's got a good crew of receivers to work with himself, led by Parker Washington, an all Big Ten type receiver, Keandre Lambert-Smith, another guy, Mitchell Tinsley, who transfers from Western Kentucky and put up huge numbers last year in Zach Kitley's system. And then don't forget about their tight ends, Brenton Strange and Theo Johnson, two guys that will be used, I think, interchangeably and could be the two best tight ends, or two of the top five tight ends in the Big Ten overall. Running back and O-line is a little bit of a question, and that's where I give the edge to Michigan's offensive group. So really just two starters returning on the O-line. They're going to need to get some help from guys who've been in the program or transfers. And then in the backfield, they've got the talent there. Kevon Lee returns as their leading rusher, but then they are going to turn to Nick Singleton, a 5-star recruit at running back, and 4-star recruit not too far behind him, Katron Allen. I think those three will be running back by committee, with one of them hopefully taking the lead and being the guy. On the defensive side of the ball, pretty strong defensive front. Addison Isaac and PJ Mustafer come back, and hopefully they can stay healthy. They were injured last season, but a lot of good things expected out of those two. Colton Izzard is another guy playing inside, and Nick Tarburton. They return with a lot of experience. And don't forget stud freshman DN Danny Dennis Sutton. You look at their linebackers, Curtis Jacobs, a little bit of hockey on the brain. And then Kobe King is a redshirt freshman who looked really, really good this spring, and I think he's going to have himself a damn good freshman year for the Nittany Lions. In the secondary, they're very, very deep. Love their corners, Joey Porter Jr. and Kalen King. Jair Brown is an all Big Ten type safety. They had to move Jonathan Sutherland, who did play safety, down to linebacker because they're so deep. So good things to feel confident about if you're a Penn State fan, because they're going to go against the Ohio State receivers, the Michigan receivers, the Maryland receivers, all in that Big Ten East. So I think that's a plus for the Nittany Lions. Now, what's the big difference here? Well, Michigan has some very green coordinators. On offense, Matt Weiss and Sharon Moore are the co-coordinators. And they get new defensive coordinator Jesse Minter, who is young, but he's only been a coordinator for 1 year at a Power 5 program, and that was Vanderbilt last year, and the Commodores didn't really stop a whole lot of people. He was also the D coordinator for Georgia State from 2013 to 2016, but that program only won 10 games in those 4 years. He also coached under Mike McDonald and under Harbaugh's brother John with the Baltimore Ravens. So I think that's the thing that most people are going to point to. But again, very unproven, a lot of question marks as a Power 5D coordinator. They're hoping that he can step in and continue what Mike McDonald started. Now, the other thing is the schedule. So Michigan hosts Penn State, where they've done pretty well against the Nittany Lions in Ann Arbor in the Big House. Penn State hosts Ohio State. Michigan has to go to Ohio State. So if you're talking about who's going to get tested early, Penn State gets the nod there because they open up at Purdue in Big Ten play in that opening weekend. They also have to go to Auburn and play against the Tigers on the Plains in week 3, whereas Michigan has about as marshmallowy a non-conference slate as you can imagine. They open up Big Ten play against Maryland at home. Then they have to travel to Iowa. Penn State comes to the Big House, as does Michigan State and Nebraska. And then the Wolverines have to travel to the Horseshoe to end the season, regular season, against the Buckeyes, who are pissed and who want to beat Michigan every year more than any other opponent, but more so this year. And we talked about it on our podcast that Ryan Day really needs to make sure that they get that done this year. So is that going to be a distraction for Ohio State? And after playing at Michigan State and Iowa at home, then they have to travel to Happy Valley. Is that going to be something that they're going to stub their toe against? So in 3 consecutive weeks, you're playing an 11-win Spartan team from last year. You're playing the Big Ten West division title champion Iowa Hawkeyes, and then you get to play this Penn State team that some people are calling a dark horse. So if that round robin happens, if Michigan beats Penn State at home, Penn State beats Ohio State in Happy Valley, and Ohio State beats Michigan in the Horseshoe, it's likely going to go down to the 4th or 5th tiebreaker, which is how do those teams do against their interdivisional opposition. So you look at Michigan, they have Iowa, Nebraska, and Illinois from the West. Penn State has Northwestern, Iowa, and Minnesota from the West. And Ohio State has Wisconsin, Northwestern, and Iowa from the West. So I think if things play out the way that I envision them, the nod's going to go to Michigan because I have Nebraska winning the West by 1 game over the Wisconsin Badgers. If Wisconsin wins the West by a game over Nebraska, then the nod will go to Ohio State because they'll have played the Badgers in Columbus. So I want to know, what do you think? Without trying to be too homerish, do you think that this is a likely scenario, or is it all just moot because Ohio State is going to run through the wash? Assume, please, assume that Ohio State will trip up against Penn State at Beaver Stadium, where that game has been tight whenever they've gone out there. So assuming that that round robin string of victories happens, who do you like better, Michigan or do you like Penn State? Who is more likely to be that second place team in the East, or possibly the dark horse winner over Ohio State? Is it the Wolverines or is it the Nittany Lions? Hit me up on Twitter, hit me up on Instagram. Thanks for following, thanks for being you, thanks for letting me talk this great sport. I'm Chappy, and this is what I know.